What if I told you that the money in your bank account, the cash in your wallet, isn't real? Not in the way a house is real or a bag of wheat is real. What if I told you it's just a story we all agree to believe in? And that throughout history, that story has ended suddenly and brutally, time and time again. We think of financial collapse as a black swan event, a once-in-a-century disaster. That's a dangerous fantasy. Financial collapse is the rule, not the exception. The names and dates change, but the script remains terrifyingly the same. This isn't about fear-mongering. This is about pattern recognition. Because understanding the past is the only way to prepare for the future. Let's travel back to the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, their gold coin, the solidus, was the world's reserve currency. Pure, trusted, the bedrock of trade. But empires are expensive. Wars, plagues, grand palaces. They all cost. So, emperors began a slow, insidious process. They started mixing cheaper metals into the solidus. Just a little at first. Nobody noticed. But over generations, the debasement accelerated. The once pure gold coin became a cheap bronze disc coated in a thin wash of silver. The trust that had been built over 700 years evaporated into dust. The money had died. Sound familiar? Governments cannot resist this temptation. It's the oldest trick in the book. Fast forward to the American Civil War. The Union needed to fund its massive war machine. So it printed money unbacked by gold or silver called greenbacks. Their value plummeted. A soldier's pay, promised in dollars, could buy less and less each month. The government was effectively stealing value from its own citizens and soldiers through inflation. The French revolutionaries tried the same thing with their assignats, paper money supposedly backed by confiscated church lands. But they printed and printed and printed. The result? Hyperinflation so extreme that people used the worthless notes as wallpaper. In every case, the state chose the printing press over fiscal discipline. The promise of money became a cruel joke played on the people holding it. And what about the institutions we're told are indestructible? Let's talk about too big to fail. This isn't a modern concept invented in 2008. In 14th century Florence, the Bardi and Peruzzi families ran the most powerful banks in Europe. They were the Goldman Sachs of their day, financing kings and kingdoms. They loaned a fortune to King Edward III of England to fund his wars with France. When the king defaulted, these too big to fail giants didn't get a bailout. They imploded, taking the entire Florentine economy down with them. The crash was so devastating it took the city a century to recover. 600 years later, Lehman Brothers, another giant deemed untouchable, evaporated overnight, triggering a global crisis. The lesson is clear. When the system is strained, too big to fail is the first lie to be exposed. These crises are not just about loss. They are about the single largest transfer of wealth imaginable. When the Black Death swept through Europe, it killed up to half the population. A horrific tragedy. But for the survivors, suddenly their labor was incredibly valuable. Land was cheap. For the first time, peasants had leverage. They could demand higher wages and better conditions. A new middle class was born from the ashes of the old world. Now consider the last few years. Governments responded to the COVID-19 pandemic by printing trillions of dollars. Where did that money go? It didn't go into your savings account. It flowed into asset stocks, real estate, cryptocurrencies. Those who owned assets saw their wealth explode. Those who only had a salary and savings saw their purchasing power destroyed by the inflation that followed. The wealth wasn't destroyed. It was simply redistributed upwards. Let's look at a modern trap, borrowing in a currency you don't control. In 1997, countries across Asia had pegged their currencies to the US dollar and taken on immense dollar-denominated debt. When international investors lost confidence and pulled their money out, these Asian currencies collapsed. Suddenly, the debt they owed, priced in dollars, doubled or tripled overnight. Entire nations were driven to bankruptcy, not because they were unproductive, but because they had built their prosperity on a promise they couldn't keep, the promise of a stable exchange rate to a currency they couldn't print. It was a death trap. And what happens when you can't even get your own money? Look at Lebanon starting in 2019. For years, the banks offered impossibly high interest rates, a classic sign of a system on the brink. Then, one day, the party stopped. The banks simply locked their doors. ATMs went dry. People with life savings in dollars, they thought, were told they could only withdraw small amounts in a local currency whose value was collapsing daily. Their life's work vanished. This reveals the ultimate truth. Your bank account is not your money. It's a loan you have made to the bank. And under pressure, the bank can and will refuse to pay you back. So, through the fires of history, what survives? Not the paper promises, not the digital entries on a ledger. Not the trust in systems that have failed again and again. What survives are real things. Gold and silver, the money of last resort for 5,000 years. Productive land that can grow food. The commodities that people actually need to live. And just as important, real skills. The ability to build something, to fix something, to grow something, to transport something. The carpenter, the farmer, the mechanic, the medic, these are the professions that have real, undeniable value when the complex financial web tears apart. We stand at a unique moment, facing a global system more complex, more leveraged, and more fragile than ever before. The patterns are screaming at us from the pages of history. The debasement of currency, the fragility of the banks, the inevitability of wealth transfer. This isn't about predicting the exact date of the next crisis. That's a fool's errand. This is about recognizing the fundamental nature of money and risk. So I'll leave you with a question, a challenge. Look at your own life, your savings, your investments. The question isn't asterisk if asterisk it falls apart. The question is, when it does, will you be left holding worthless promises on paper, or will you be holding something real? Thanks for watching. If this look into history has given you a new perspective, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that challenges the way you see the world. Stay prepared.